You're listening to Holy Health, the podcast that brings you the latest in health ideas and technology across the spectrum of fields. While ultimately our fate is up to God, how we get there is determined by us. As it says in Kohelet, there is nothing new under the sun. We get that everything can be found in Torah. Our goal is to empower you with knowledge that may help you make better lifestyle choices. This podcast has been brought to you by Musach Haguf Physical Therapy and Personal Training Studio. Our motto is fixing the past in order to build the future. You can find us on Instagram at Musach Haguf. Hey guys, I want to welcome you back to, let's call it the relaunching of the Holy Health podcast. Last week, we came back with sort of a reintroduction on why and how this podcast was started, along with what we're trying to achieve here. And this episode, we're going to actually put that to the test. This week's episode, I think, is a really important one. It's a long time in coming. I believe I recorded this episode with Dr. Christie about a year ago. I think it was pretty soon after October 7th. And, you know, it's just been over a year for most of us. And it's time to bring this back out and continue going on and trying to put these topics together, because we all have to do the best we can do. You know, we don't have control over everything. I'm sitting here right now waiting for, please God, to hear that my son is out of Lebanon and back on base. And please God, we'll be getting out of Miluim, Bezrat Hashem, tonight. And, you know, I try not to worry because I have no control over what's happening. And I just have to hope that, please God, he's going to make it out safely. And, you know, with this topic of fertility also, all we can do is the best we can do, right? We have to do everything we can do, and the rest is up to Hashem, up to God. And I heard a great quote the other day from Rav Tzadok from his book, and I thought it was very appropriate, and I probably have an interpretation that was very different than where the person who I heard this from was going with this, but I'd like to take it sort of in my own way and make it fit into this topic that we are talking about. Tzarich Adam la'amin b'Hashem yitbarach, kach tzarich achar kach la'amin ba'atzmo. Right? A person is required, or we have to believe in God, but after that, we also have to believe in ourselves. And to me, that sort of means that, well, yes, like we have to believe in God and we have to have faith that these things that we want will happen. Ultimately, we have to bring something of ourselves in that. We have to believe in ourselves as well. So whether or not somebody ultimately ends up pregnant, that for sure is up to God. But there are so many things that they can do. And we know that for everything in life, we have to do our hishtadlut. We have to try. We have to put our effort forth to be a part of hopefully making that happen. And we're not always, you know, given the answer that we want, but we still have to put in our effort. And I think with this issue, you know, for people who are struggling with fertility, we talked about last week how everybody has their own struggles with different issues, and not everybody's struggles are apparent to us, but everybody struggles with something. And some people's issues are more apparent. And I think that even with this issue of fertility, if someone is going to do everything they can do, it means listening to the advice of their doctors, but it also means maybe listening to the advice of other really smart people maybe in what might be considered the alternative world, because some of these people, like Dr. Christie, have helped many people become pregnant when maybe they thought it was never going to happen for them. And you're going to hear a lot of things that sound similar to a lot of other things we've covered in other topics, things like autoimmune disease and, you know, believe it or not, gut health might have something to do with it. And I know this is a difficult topic. I know it is, you know, really difficult for those people who are struggling with this. And most people know someone, and I'd like to ask you guys to please share this episode with anyone that you think could benefit from it. We'd like to try to reach as many people as possible. And I'm probably going to be putting out episodes new, and here and there I'm going to slip in an old episode that we're going to re-edit. I'm going to try to keep the episodes no longer than about an hour,
maybe a little bit more. So anything maybe that's come out previously that was really long might be cut down, and some of the more interesting topics, because we are now reaching a wider audience, I'd like to bring back out again, because I think this is information that can be shared and that most of us can hear more than one time. I don't know. Often I have to hear things several times until they sink into my head. So I don't have too many other pieces of news today, but I do want to remind everyone, if there is any stucco organization or anything that you're collecting for or you want me to talk about, please feel free to let me know. There are, I mean, we all know this. There are no shortage of organizations collecting for our soldiers. It's about to be winter again. Today was one of the first coldest, wettest days, and I know that there are still needs for the soldiers and things like that. And I'd like to remind you guys again about this really wonderful product that I think is really great, Dr. Shyaygen. It is a stender that goes both up and down and tilts front and back to allow you to keep your head and neck in this perfectly aligned position while you learn, or while you stare at your telephone, or maybe while you're cooking in the kitchen, or while you're just reading a book. Instead of slumping over, you're able to actually hold the book in a position that will allow your head and neck to stay aligned so that you will have less neck and back pain. It goes right along with these things that I teach my patients in physical therapy. And with that, I'd like to wish you guys a Shabbat Shalom. I hope it will be a peaceful week. All of our soldiers will come home soon. Our hostages will be let go, and that this war will come to a swift end.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Holy Health. My guest today is Dr. Jessica Christie. Dr. Christie is a naturopathic doctor, nutritionist, and the founder of Magnolia Integrative Fertility, a virtual integrative fertility clinic. She helps both women and men discover the root causes of their infertility and reclaim their fertility using natural and holistic therapies. So welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's totally my pleasure. This was something that I'm always looking for different things to present to people. And first of all, that this is mainly kind of geared towards the religious Jewish community. And in our community, fertility is such a big issue. There are always people who have issues of infertility. And in the Jewish community, it is such a big deal. It is really hard, to be like this young married person and all of your friends around you are having babies, and it's such a hard thing. And it hadn't occurred to me. Like, I'm always, interviewing different functional medicine doctors about a variety of different topics. And a couple of months ago, I met a young woman who came to me, and I found it very interesting because she was suffering from infertility. She'd been trying for years to have a baby. And one of the things she mentioned in her history was she has 2 autoimmune diseases. And right away, it clicked for me. I have got to speak to somebody who is like a functional fertility specialist. And then I reached out to you, and now we're doing this.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did. This is such a huge topic. There's so much to talk about, but there is just such a connection between our overall health and our fertility. Once you look at all the different factors that go into your health and wellness, you realize that those are also affecting your fertility. And it gives us some good guidelines on where to start when we're doing more of a root cause type of approach.
So where would you start with someone, right? Someone like this woman who came in, I'm just trying to get a sense. Obviously, it's person dependent, and you can't give me a laundry list, and I totally get that. But for example, when a couple comes into you, what is the procedure sort of like? How do they start with you?
Yeah. So really, getting a pretty thorough history is always how we start. So, for example, my whole practice is virtual. So we're meeting similar like to this. It's all talking. And of course, I think it's very important to also have things like physical exams, gynecological exams, but those would be referred back to their primary care physicians. For me, it would be looking at all of those factors to fertility. And another way to call that is determinants of health. So what are all of those factors or determinants? So they're things like genetics, which we, can't do a whole lot about, but all definitely good to know. Things like your diet and nutrition. How are you eating? How are you sleeping? How is your energy? How are your hormones? Do you have any symptoms? How is your digestion? How is your circulation, neurological issues? We talk about basically head to toe, anything and everything that could be going on that in a more conventional type of fertility clinic, these topics might seem totally unrelated to fertility, and maybe those questions aren't asked. But from a holistic perspective, we want to be connecting those dots because you're one body and, you're not these separate organ systems. It might be helpful to talk about them in that way when you're, trying to understand them. But from a holistic perspective, we want to see the whole body. We want to see everything that's going on, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything. You're one person. And so that's where we get started with both men and women, is a really thorough history with the goal of getting to the root cause. And I always tell patients and clients, it's almost always multiple root causes. It's not just one thing. But if we can pick out a few of those, then we know where to start. We know where we can go with our treatment plan.
And so people who are coming to you, are they generally coming to you and sort of concurrently doing IVF as well? Or are they coming to you in place of doing IVF? Or because I know with this particular person I'm speaking of, she has had already a few failed IVF attempts. And that was what really made me say, wait a minute, with the autoimmune, like maybe her body's attacking the fetus or something.
Yeah. So it's pretty split. It's both. I definitely have couples who are at the beginning of their journey. They know they want to start with a more natural route first and then kind of go from there. And then I also have couples who have already been down that road. They have had several failed attempts, or they might even be about to begin a new IVF protocol. And so they're right in the middle of it, and they're kind of seeing me more for adjunctive type care. So definitely split.
And let me just backtrack for a minute and let me ask you, how did you get into this specific niche field?
Yeah. So I always had hormonal imbalance issues ever since I was a young teenager. I had a lot of hormonal symptoms and had I think 2 or 3 different doctors kind of hint that when I was older and it was time to have a baby, it might be difficult based on everything that I had been experiencing. And for me, having kids, being a mom was always my number one priority, always. So I had this in the back of my head, like, I need to get this sorted out now. I'm not going down that road. I have to figure this out. And as I, got into college age, I was figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. I knew medicine meant a lot to me. And I was looking to apply to more, allopathic, conventional type MD programs. And I started looking at the curriculum, and there were none in the US that had, more than one, half-hour lecture on nutrition, for example. And they didn't really talk about any of those other factors that I knew were so important. And I was surprised to see that. And so in that journey, I discovered naturopathic medicine, realized it was kind of exactly what I was looking for. It was more of that natural root cause approach. And when I pursued that, I also kind of used myself as my very first patient, and started using all of these more holistic therapies and really got my hormones back in balance. And I now have 3 healthy children. I was very blessed to not have any fertility problems. And, I never claimed to say that I had experienced infertility. I didn't. But it was always something that I feared was a possibility for me. And so I was able to take a more preventative approach. So that's how I got here.
Okay, listen, it's great. And I'm sure that you've been able to help a lot of people, and it's a really, really wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So have you found that gut health is an important measure of what's going on? So many of the topics that I've brought to, my audience, at the end of the day, it's like gut health will be a big, giant piece of like that core root of that problem. And that includes with a lot of hormonal issues. People talk about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gut health is probably, the number one thing that I'm always asking about in my medical history, my intakes. There is such a connection between gut health and hormonal health, gut health and overall health. And there are a few different aspects to this. There's the gut wall integrity. So this goes back actually to the woman you were talking about with autoimmune. If you have tears in your gut lining, your food and other, particles that are supposed to be entering the bloodstream in a very specific manner through specific channels in your gut lining. And if you have holes, or tiny holes in your gut lining, you're getting these bigger particles and these food particles seeping into your bloodstream in an inappropriate way, and it's alerting your immune system. So your immune system sees this as foreign, and that can trigger an autoimmune type reaction. So that's one example. Then you also have the gut microbiome. So the large trillions of bacteria that live within our guts, and they're super important to our health. They provide, they manufacture vitamins that we can't make on our own. They help break down our food. And they even produce different neurotransmitters for us, and brain health is definitely important for hormonal health as well. Our brain is always in constant connection with our endocrine glands, which are the glands that produce hormones. So that connection is a big important piece too. But actually in naturopathic medicine, most of us would say that, diseases begin in the gut, and it's always the first place you want to look at first.
And is there a specific diet that you recommend? Is it more based on per person, or?
Yeah, it's definitely something that gets personalized. There are so many different factors to, what would be healthy or not to you as an individual. But there are definitely some basic things that everyone would learn, which is you want to eat the highest quality food. Oftentimes that's local, organic, if you can find it. And eating seasonal as well. So, the nutrients and that's, you're more likely to get local food if it's seasonal as well. But the nutrient content would be higher if you're eating in a more seasonal way. And then you want to avoid processed foods as much as possible. So it's really hard in our modern world to be 100% with diet. It just is, even if you're really strict about it. But doing your best can make a really big difference, and avoiding anything artificial. So those are kind of the main tips for that. And then, it would be a little bit more individualized as far as, how much protein and fat are you going to need as opposed to someone else? Or would you do better on more of a plant-based type diet, or someone else would be doing much better on a more carnivore type diet? So that would depend on some other factors. And usually I would do some testing to really take a better look at that.
Would you mind if I asked you what kind of testing you do? I'm really interested in hearing about that, because I know that genetically, like having had on Kasha Khan from the DNA company, I know that there can be people who could do okay on a plant-based diet and not everybody can digest legumes. I'm just wondering if there are ways to tell that besides with like DNA testing.
Yeah, so DNA testing is a really great way to start. But there are also tests for micronutrient levels, and you can actually see if your current diet is giving you all of the micronutrients that you need. And then actually going back to gut health. So if you don't have an optimized gut, you could be eating a really perfect diet for you, but you're not absorbing your nutrients. So that's another factor. You want to look at gut health. And I feel like there was one more. It'll come to me.
Oh, no problem. I had kind of asked, like, are there factors that you could share that would maybe make somebody better on carnivore versus better on a more vegetarian?
I just remembered the one I was talking about or thinking about. Blood sugar regulation is really important for diet. And so something that at least is available in the US, I'm not sure globally if it is, but a continuous glucose monitor, which is a little arm patch. You wear it for about 2 weeks, and it gives you a reading of your blood sugar every 15 minutes or so. And having a balanced blood sugar level is super important, again, for hormonal balancing. And it can show you, again, if your current diet is working for you. You might think that, a plant-based diet, for example, is exactly what makes you feel good. And then you do this glucose monitor and you see that maybe you don't have enough protein or fat coming in because your blood sugar is spiking all over the place. Oftentimes a plant-based diet can shift more towards, carbohydrate heavy. So it's well-intentioned, but you might, be fluctuating a little bit too much with your blood sugar. So I would say that's another really key test to help individualize your diet as much as possible.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And definitely there have been several other people that concur with that as well as that being a very, very important piece. Do you believe in fasting at all? I haven't even done a dedicated fasting episode yet. Waiting for a specific person who said in February. Is it something that you believe in? I'm just looking, no right or wrong, anything like that. I'm just kind of trying to get an overall picture if there's something that jives with you with some of the things that I've heard from other people. I'm just trying.
Yeah. So I would say in general, I'm definitely a fan of fasting. When it comes to fertility, though, it's all about timing and what would be appropriate for the individual. So, for example, I have seen mostly women who struggle with fasting for fertility. I have seen it do better in men who have fertility issues. But fasting can be a really big stressor to certain people, a physical stressor. And so that stress can alter hormones in a negative way. So I say, if a patient wants to experiment, try intermittent fasting for a couple weeks and see how you feel. Sometimes, what I'm getting back is their energy feels worse. They have worse hormonal symptoms. Maybe their menstrual cycle was really off that next cycle. And so those are kind of clues that maybe fasting isn't the right thing for them in this time. And so maybe after the fertile age, I see postmenopausal women do really well with fasting. So it's not like a hard and fast no for fertility. I would usually experiment and warn mostly women that it might not be the right time.
Okay. And how about birth control? Like people that have been on like the pill or something hormonal like that. Do you find that messes a lot with people's fertility or with some people's fertility? And are you a proponent? This is a little bit of a side note because it's not necessarily to do with fertility, but I'm just curious to know your views on the hormonal birth control in general, as far as the way it impacts the body.
Yeah, it definitely has a large impact on the body. And I have seen it interfere with fertility, but it's usually on a more short-term basis. So oftentimes those first few months, after getting off can be kind of wonky in women who are kind of trying to resume their cycle, which is good. I don't usually see really long-term effects. However, in sensitive people, there definitely can be. And one of the reasons for that is if someone also has other environmental toxins that they're dealing with, your liver health is really, really key for general wellness, but definitely for fertility as well. But your liver plays so many roles. And one of the main roles is its role in detoxification. So it's trying to filter out not only the toxins or chemicals that we might encounter in our environment, but our hormones as well. So we're always exchanging, old hormones, old blood cells. Our whole body is always regenerating. And so our liver is helping a lot to do this process. So the hormones coming from our body and external hormones coming from birth control, for example, all have to filter through the liver. And it can really be a burden on your liver if you don't have ways to help support your liver function. And so I find with women who maybe have some other factors slowing down the efficiency of their liver, they might be more sensitive to the after effects of getting off birth control because their liver is just flooded with too many things on the to-do list, basically, is what's going on. As far as my opinion on birth control, I definitely dislike using birth control for the purpose of regulating hormones. I think for the social aspect, if you're trying to have a tool to prevent pregnancy, I think that's almost a totally separate topic. What I see, at least here in the US, is that birth control is being recommended as the treatment for regulating hormones. Or you have PCOS, you have endometriosis, you have any type of symptom, here's birth control. And the problem is it's not at all getting to the root cause. It's artificially regulating your hormones, right? It's all artificial. And so what happens is when you get off the birth control, all of those previous symptoms come back, and sometimes worse because you've been suppressing it for so long. So especially with young teenagers, and this is something I personally went through as well. I had to really spend some time kind of like detoxing off of birth control. I was on it for many years for the purposes of all of those hormonal symptoms I had told you about earlier as a young teenager. And so I would love to be able to catch young teenagers earlier and say, what can we do about these symptoms in a more holistic way? To where, birth control should, in my opinion, only be used to prevent pregnancy. So that's kind of my view on that.
Okay. Yeah. And if someone, let's say there is a young teen that's having issues, let's say of heavy bleeding and things like that, exactly what you're saying, where they're saying, put them on this to like regulate their cycle, what would you tell someone to do instead? Or is it more based on what you're finding and testing? Or
yeah, it's definitely based on testing, and what we find in a medical history would look very similar to my fertility meetings. But a lot would have to do with a focus on liver health, making sure that it's not being overburdened and that it's really being supportive or supported. And you can do that with different herbs, different supplements, different at-home therapies, like a castor oil pack, or things like that can really, really help. And then diet and nutrition is also really huge for regulating hormones, making sure you're eating an appropriate diet for you and your body. So those are kind of the key areas for that.
Okay. Thank you so much. I know we got sidetracked a little bit away from
pregnancy.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just feel like it all comes together, and I have one kid who, I have 3 daughters, and luckily none of them listen to this podcast. They don't, listen to anything their mother says. So where, that was the case where she had very, very heavy bleeding, and it caused her iron to actually go incredibly, incredibly low. And I mean, it's coming back due to eating a higher meat, more iron, heavier heme iron based diet. But I also just waited, like the doctor 2 years ago, like wanted to put her on birth control. And I was like, absolutely not. She wasn't willing to eat the way I tried to get her to eat working with a functional medicine person either. But, it is slowly regulating itself as she got older and as, maybe she's eating a little bit differently. But that was absolutely the first thing they did was like, oh, no. Like her hormones are out of balance. She needs the birth control pill. And I was like, no way. Like, I'm not putting her on that. Just knowing that it was fake hormones, there was like no way I was going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
When is it that people are usually coming? Are they finding you before? Would you recommend maybe people early on with the way the world is so crazy and people eating, you know what I mean? And knowing maybe they have some medical issues, is it advisable to come to you beforehand?
Absolutely. So my favorite time to work with couples is on a more preventative preconception is what we call it, type of care. And really in all of medicine, if you can be proactive and preventative, it's always much better than waiting until something is more of a severe problem and having to reverse things and backtrack. Oftentimes we can catch different trends going on through your medical history or through testing and stop that in its tracks. So just an example, like micronutrients, if we can see that different nutrients are trending lower and lower, we know that we need to address your diet. Possibly we need to add some supplements, but there's something going on. And the last thing you would want, let's say, iron is the nutrient we're talking about, is to go, low iron for too long. That would certainly impact fertility, but it could be a quick fix if we just catch it right away. So that would definitely be optimal. And we can probably have the most impact if we treat preventatively. But I would say most people are coming to me after the fact. So they already know this is something that they're struggling with, whether or not they've been to another fertility clinic or tried any other medical procedures. That kind of fluctuates, but I would say most of the time they already understand that there's some kind of issue and it hasn't been happening naturally for them for whatever reason.
And do you work in conjunction with any of their doctors or physicians' offices or anything like that? Or is it
directly? Yeah, not directly. Usually I'll just have them forward me any relevant notes or labs that they've gotten from their other doctors that I can take a look. But usually I'm kind of on my own.
And I'm just curious, what do traditional Western medical doctors think of what you do?
It's hard to say. I think it probably depends on the doctor in general. There are definitely some medical doctors who, don't really understand naturopathic medicine, and think that it is, less than conventional medicine. And there are lots of doctors who are very open-minded. They actually are in different programs trying to learn more of these natural techniques because they know that ultimately that's what patients want. And with integrative medicine, where you're really taking the best of both worlds, I kind of think that's the future of medicine. And in that sense, we're kind of both going to have to lean on each other a little bit more and understand where we're coming from. I think conventional medicine and naturopathic medicine both have amazing pros and they both have cons. But if we can work together in a more integrative way, I think that's definitely the future and that's what patients want.
Yeah, sounds about right. Absolutely sounds about right. Are there any stories you could tell us, like interesting stories of people maybe who were trying, obviously without names, but people who were trying and, maybe unsuccessfully in other places and you were able to help them? And
yeah, one that came to mind when we were talking about gut health, I have a patient who was we figured out that she was suffering with celiac disease, which is where gluten from wheat actually causes intestinal damage. So there's damage that you could actually see on a biopsy. And it absolutely interferes with how you're absorbing all of the rest of your nutrients. So she had started a gluten-free diet, was very strict. And after several months of trying to conceive, was still unsuccessful. And it was right about that time that she found me. And I focused on a diet that included, it was kind of like similar to a protein shake, but it was more medicinal in that it was broken down to the basics. So instead of protein, it was amino acids and it was vitamins and nutrients, because I knew she was not absorbing anything she was eating. And she actually had a really healthy diet. But by giving her these nutrients in a way that her body could use, it was enough to just support a pregnancy. And she was able to get pregnant, I believe, a month or two after that. So that was a great success story of we know you have gut health issues. So how can we bypass this in the meantime? And then, of course, we were working on healing the gut also. But that was kind of secondary because she just had such a priority of getting pregnant fast. So that was a great one. Another one, I had a patient who was late 30s. She was told that IVF was her only option. And I ran some more thorough testing. She had a couple symptoms that seemed to be hinting that her thyroid wasn't optimal. And we ran a really full thyroid panel and found that there were issues there. So just by treating the thyroid and getting her thyroid gland in really optimal function, thyroid hormones, it had a trickle down effect to the rest of her hormones. And usually I give a timeline of any hormonal balancing. We want to give a minimum of about 3 months of treatment to really see a difference and see if, things are progressing in the right way. And with her, it was about 3 months, like to the week, that she conceived. And I remember she sent me a message saying, you said 3 months, and it was exactly 3 months. And so that's all it was. We pinpointed that, one factor, and that was it for her. So those are just a few samples of, some of the things that I see.
Well, no, it must be so gratifying, when somebody wants something so bad to help them in this, because it's a big deal. Like for somebody who wants to have kids, like not to be able to have kids, like it's such a big deal. So to be able to help give somebody something that they want so badly, I'm sure it must feel really good and make you. I always say to patients when they feel better, I'm a physical therapist. I always say, like, when they're like, oh, I feel so much better, I'm like, I'm just as happy as you are, I'm
totally. Yes. Yeah. I feel the same way.
Right. And so, well, you said that when you went to get pregnant, you actually had already fixed all your hormonal issues, so you didn't have any problem. Correct.
Yeah. It was relatively easy.
Do you have people that ever come to you when they have already, let's say, successfully had IVF and maybe they're already pregnant and maybe sometimes with more than one baby, where they come to you just to make sure that they're supporting the pregnancy properly?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The treatment would definitely look different in terms of, when someone's already pregnant, you want to be really careful on fluctuating their hormones in any way. But things like supporting nutrition, supporting healthy blood flow is also key. So just healthy circulation, making sure that as her belly grows, she's still able to do basic movements. Because being sedentary all day is not good for anyone, but definitely when your nutrients are trying to get, to the lower part of your body as your belly's growing, You need to have that blood flow and that movement. So those are some of the areas that I talk about with pregnant women. But definitely, I have women who come to me and they're already pregnant.
Listen, it makes sense. I think probably everybody, should look at their nutrition and get some support with that once they're pregnant.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question that may be a little funny. Do you find that a lot of the people that have maybe issues with fertility maybe have gone through some sort of big emotional stress in their life, or a big, huge PTSD, like something really, really traumatic, I guess is the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, there's a huge connection with emotions and mental health and really anything physical, but certainly fertility. Um, I I address that in terms of, I ask about it and I might give some techniques, but I'm always trying to, refer out to someone who specializes in that, because that's a whole humongous field on its own. But that's definitely a factor. And again, when you're looking at someone in a holistic way, you can't miss emotions and past traumas. It's just so important to everything going on with someone's health.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I'd sort of do the same thing. And that I'll sometimes ask, if someone tells me they've had back pain since they were 15, well, it's not normal for a 15-year-old to have back pain. So I'll often ask, did something happen? I'm not asking you to tell me what happened. I'm just asking if there was something, because I find that sometimes when people can make a connection and understand that whatever that emotional trauma was may be impacting what's going on with them, sometimes that's enough to actually sort of help them turn the corner when they can put it together, whether or not they were treated. And I'm not trying to psychoanalyze anybody, because that's not my therapy specialty. So
right.
Yeah, so I just figured it would hold true, by you as well.
Yeah.
Is there any advice that you could maybe give to maybe somebody who's been trying to get pregnant and who's gone, through IVF? Is there any, obviously advice can never be standard, but maybe tips you could give people, or?
Yeah. So if we think about, how we're getting started in understanding what are all the root causes, right? We're talking about those determinants of health. What we want to do is create the conditions for fertility, which sounds really simple, but it's not always super easy. So what would some of those new conditions be? Proper nourishment. If you have any digestive symptoms, you definitely need to go to a specialist to help with your gut health, to make sure you're actually absorbing your nutrients. But try and eat as healthy as possible. Getting good blood flow, so simple movements. A simple technique that I love to share is something called contrast showers. And it's really easy. You can do it in your, daily shower. You don't have to do a separate therapy for this, but you start with hot water, you switch to cold water, and you can do back and forth, as many times as you want. You want to do a minimum of once, though. So you always want to end with the cold. So even if you do a full hot shower, end with a cold for just about 30 seconds. And what this does is, the difference in temperatures, you have the heat, which dilates your blood vessels, brings the blood closer to the surface level. And then the cold constricts your blood vessels and it pushes that blood back towards your internal organs. And you get that pumping motion. So it's really powerful for circulation overall and good blood flow. So that's something easy you could do to make sure your nutrients are actually getting to the place you want them to get to. And then a couple other areas. So looking at your environmental toxins, are you eating any organic food? The more, the better. Again, that's a really tough one, depending on, where you live and what you have access to. But how is the air you're breathing, the water you're drinking? Get yourself some air filters and water filters. And try and use more natural materials for your clothing instead of all of the plastics and things like that. You can remove those things from your home and from your life as much as possible. And that would help release that liver burden that we were talking about. So your liver can more efficiently and effectively help process your hormones. And I would say the last tip is focusing on your circadian rhythm. So this is really key for fertility. Our modern world has destroyed our natural circadian rhythms. Most people are not sleeping well. They're on their phones until right before they fall asleep. And that blue light coming from any electronic is alerting your body that it's daytime. And it's not true. It's nighttime. You should be asleep. But that is shifting your hormone balance, whether you know it or not. So making sure you have really a healthy sleep environment is super important for fertility. And then first thing in the morning, get some sunlight, because that'll shift you the other way. So you wake up in the morning, your body is alerted by the sun that it's daytime. And then at night, you want it nice and dark so that your body knows it's time to sleep. So those are just some basic tips that really everyone should know and should do. And if you start there, you'll be on, a perfect place to get started, to where if you needed further testing, you've already taken that first step at least.
That's great. I know people will appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what does spirituality mean to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I did not grow up very religious. So to me, it always had a different meaning. Knowing that to some, it means whatever religious practice they believe in. For me, it's more so a connection to the earth and a connection to other people. And sometimes, I think these last few years, ever since the pandemic, I think a lot of people are spiritually deficient because we are not connected to the people in our lives. We're not connected to nature and the earth. And we've been, isolated and inside. So I think those are really important factors. Again, thinking holistically, you want to be addressing those factors. And most people have, varying definitions of spirituality, but it should absolutely be an area that should be nourished in whatever way makes sense to you.
I fully agree. And you made me think of one more question. So I don't normally, I'm going to ask you where people can find you in a minute.
Yeah.
But you made me think of one more question. And that was, did you find a rise in infertility at all? Like, through the pandemic, after the pandemic, have you seen a change, or is it just that more people are looking for maybe more alternative / functional solutions?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. I've seen an increase. I don't know that I could really pinpoint exactly what it was. There's so many theories out there, and that could be a whole other conversation.
Yes, it could be. One that some people may not want to have, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't even know if I have a defined opinion on any of that anyway. It just, right. I've seen an increase, and I think it's a multifactorial, issue. I think there are lots of reasons for that.
No, I agree with you. And listen, it was certainly a huge stressor. It's just 3 years in itself. Whether you had COVID, you didn't have COVID, like it was a big stressor being locked away from people. So, and that can factor in just that being locked away in so many different aspects of what's going on with people as well. So, okay, thank you for that. And where can people find you? It's great that you work virtually, because even though a lot of the listeners are here in Israel, not everybody is. There are people all over the world that listen. And knowing that you are an English speaker, which obviously anyone listening to this podcast is an English speaker, and that you work virtually is fantastic. So what's the best places for people to find you?
Yeah, so I'm actually having some finishing touches to another virtual program, and it's called Truly Holistic Fertility. So you can go to trulyholisticfertility.com and sign up for more information. And as soon as that goes live, whoever signs up will be notified. And then you can visit my practice website as well, which is magnoliaintegrativefertility.com. So those are my two areas.
Okay, amazing. And do you do social media at all? Not so much.
I do. I'm trying to get better at that. Actually, that's one of my goals.
I agree.
I would love to reach more people. So if you find me today, you'll be like, oh, why does she have like 2 posts? But okay. If you, yes, on Facebook, it's Magnolia Integrative Fertility, and Instagram, it's Truly Holistic Fertility.
Okay, beautiful. No, well, I'll find them. I'll link them. I'll follow you because I actually found you by literally doing a Google search, and you were one of the first people that came up. So amazing. I don't think there are so many people who are specifically focusing on functional fertility, because I was willing, like, if you came up really at the top in a Google search, that means, you know what I mean? Like, if you're telling me you're not even majorly on Instagram, that you are doing something that a lot of people aren't doing. And I think that it's a really, really important topic. And
it is,
you know, something that people will be most appreciative of and happy about and all of that. So,
yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm not quite sure when this will come out, but you know, anyone in Israel, we're in the middle of the war right now. So I really appreciate you know, doing this, and it's great because it got me to get my mind off of what's going on here for a little while. And this is just a topic that I feel is so important to this community. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I could talk for hours and hours about this. So I love getting more information out there. It's so important.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm so excited that it is the first time in quite a while that we have Rebbetzin Dini Coopersmith with us. And Dini has been an educator and she's worked in outreach for the past 32 years. She's currently teaching at Be'er Miriam and at Orthodox Torah, which is a seminary that she helped to open just 2 weeks after October 7th. She also runs the Women's Reconnection Trips, which you can find out more information about those on her website, which we will link. And she has 5 children and 2 grandchildren, and she lives with her husband in Jerusalem. So, Dini, I'm so excited to have you back on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dara, for inviting me.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so it was a great podcast. You were talking about functional fertility, which you were explaining to me means like finding the root cause. Okay, like trying to figure it out, like why do people experience infertility? A couple of things, you know, kind of stuck with me. You were telling the on the interview, you were saying that in the Jewish community, especially in Israel, it's really hard for women who are not able to have children, or it doesn't come naturally for them, or they're having challenges in fertility because like families really have a lot of kids on average. And it's a big deal in Judaism. It seems to be a big deal in the Torah or just somehow in the Jewish community. It's a really big deal. And the question is, why is it such a big deal? Which we we'll discuss it in a few minutes if we have a chance. But also, it's amazing to me that this is the one challenge in the Torah, as far as I can see, that it actually mentions in the Midrash why it happens, okay? Why it happened. So we know that there's 3 patriarchs and 4 matriarchs to our nation, right? We have Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and we have, who are the matriarchs?
Are you quizzing me now?
Sarah? Yeah, I'm a teacher, sorry.
Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah.
Good job.
Thank goodness I passed that one.
Now you're going to remember. Now you're going to remember that forever. You'll never forget. Okay. So the thing about these three couples, right? It's three couples, but it's kind of four women. Out of those four matriarchs, how many of them experienced fertility struggles?
Okay, Sarah for sure.
Sarah for sure.
Okay, so hold on. Rachel.
Rachel for sure. And Rivka. Remember how Yitzchak and Rivka had to daven, and for 20 years, they were married for 20 years without children.
Okay, I really didn't remember that. I'm a little embarrassed, but okay.
Yes, you do
Wow,
remember.
3 out of 4. That's a lot. Wow.
3 out of 4.
Wow.
So first of all, that's a wild concept in and of itself, right? 3 out of 4 matriarchs. Now, the word matriarch means mother, right? That's what it means, like a mother. So out of 4 matriarchs, 3 experienced fertility problems, right? Only Leah went ahead to like have 7 kids, no problem, 1, 2, 3, and she, the only reason actually, well, okay. So the Midrash.
I could give you my opinion on why her wedding wasn't an easy. Well, her wedding wasn't an easy one. She was the unwanted bride. So at least she could have kids.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say that. Apparently God seems to be running the world for a change. It seems like maybe he has something to do with it. But the Midrash, okay, in Shira Shirim Rabbah actually asks the question, Lama nit akru imahot? Why were the matriarchs barren, not able to have children? What's up? Now, yes, of course they did have children, because otherwise there would be no Jewish nation and they wouldn't actually be matriarchs. But, it was a lot of years. With Sarah, she had to wait till she was 90 years old. I mean, that's not even normal, right? With Rivka, she waited 20 years. With Rachel, she waited so long, and then she basically died with her second child. It was so hard for her to have kids. So it's amazing to me that these matriarchs, most of their lives were actually spent without children, and when they finally did have children, they had 1 or 2. They did not have a lot of kids.
True.
Okay. So there's something very, very interesting about that. Just the fact that the Torah even calls them a matriarch, and when for most of their lives, they weren't even biological mothers. So there must be something that doesn't necessarily have to be a biological mother in order to be considered a mother, a matriarch. There's something bigger than that, than just the actual physical children. However, okay, so do you want to hear why? Why were they all barren? Lama nit akru imahot says.
Wait, should I guess?
Yes.
I feel like because they needed to daven to Hashem. It was like a challenge for them that they maybe needed to come closer to Hashem or something like that.
Seems like you had a Jewish education, a good Jewish education, and you do know that. Mipnei shenit ava hakadosh baruch hu letfilatan ulesichatam shel tzadikim. Hashem was waiting, God was waiting for their prayers and their conversations of these righteous people. So once again, we see that, yes, Hashem, God, is running the world, has a very special relationship with these primary Jewish people, the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And he was like, if I make them, just everything goes smoothly for them, if they are rich, which they are, I don't know how he knows that, but that's what the Midrash says. They are rich, they are beautiful. If I give them children, they'll have no reason to talk to me, to cry out to me. So, it boils down to the fact that the purpose of creation is about a relationship with God, and that kind of ties into that question that you'd like to ask everybody. What does spirituality mean to you? And really, the purpose of creation is about connecting to God and about relationship with Hashem. And if we don't have a lack, and it's something to discuss in a moment, why not having children is such a huge lack. But if you don't have any lackings in life, there's a good chance you're not going to remember to turn to God, because God is the only one that can give you children, that can give you anything really, but especially children. And we also know this idea that the key to children, mafteach yoledet biyad Hashem, that God alone has the key to the ability to have children. So if you're going to go talk about functional, fertility, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of practical advice or other things that are not exactly Torah based, but in the end of the day, it really seems like the root cause and the root place to look for, the ability to have children is just directing it to God, asking God. Now, this is a crazy thing. I was in my school the other day. First of all, it's a funny school that I'm running. I don't even know what's going to happen next year with it, but it's these girls are like from very, very religious homes. And for whatever reason, they were kind of turned off by the Jewish education that they received in their homes. And, one of the things that they think is absolutely a like huge no-no, like one of the cardinal sins. They
Right.
think it's completely not okay to take birth control, which is really funny. They think it's completely not okay in Judaism to take birth control. This is one of the things we need to deprogram them in our particular program. It's like, no, we're not Roman Catholics. We are allowed to take birth control in our in our
Right.
religion. We are not that religion that says that it's not allowed. But to them, when they come from for some reason in the religious community, it is so unacceptable. And so they think that is like a huge, huge, big no-no. And as a result, that's they don't even know so much about like, oh, well, that means I can't exactly have a boyfriend. I can't sleep with my boyfriend because, I can't, like, they don't even realize the difference in priority. Like, I'm not allowed to take birth control, but maybe I am allowed to sleep with my boyfriend. Okay. But anyway, despite that, why am I bringing this up? I was in school the other day, and actually somebody was discussing this really cool idea. And basically, this is my last point, and I think with that we could end, is that in the creation story, there were three blessings given. It says, Vayivarech Elokim or Vayivarech Hashem et. Do you have any idea what they are? Vayivarech, God blessed.
Mm-hmm.
God blessed three things. One is Shabbat. Vayivarech Elokim et Yom HaShvi'i, right? We know that from Kiddush. God blessed Shabbat. Then God blessed man, and he told him, Peru Urvu, be fruitful and multiply. That was the blessing. And God blessed one of the animal species. Do you know who they are? Vayivarech et, also to be fruitful and multiply.
Okay, hold on.
One of the animals.
Bunny rabbits? I'm trying to think of one that has a lot of babies, like gerbils.
No. Can you think of which animal has lots of is very fruitful?
Dogs, cats?
No. Fish.
Oh, okay, fine, because they have a lot of eggs. Okay, fine.
Right. Okay. So here's what this rabbi was telling the girls yesterday, because we have these themes at the end of the year. Like this theme this week is Shabbat, talking about Shabbat. So he said a cute thing. He said there's three blessings in the days of creation. One is Shabbat, one is man, and one is the fish, right? And they should be fruitful and multiply. That's the men, the people, and the fish. So he says, so that's why human beings eat fish on Shabbat, and then they get like a double, like a whole multiple blessing going on. So he asks, why do the fish need to be blessed to be multiple, to multiply and be fruitful? Why? Like, why only the fish? Why not the other animals, right? What's up with that? Okay, we get mankind. We would like there to be a lot of people in the world, but why do the fish have to be blessed? So he said something so interesting, and I forgot to ask him what his source was, but I think I remember him saying, I don't know, I forgot. He said that the fish naturally are in a cool environment. They are cold. They're a cold species. Now, when you're cold, it's very hard to be fruitful and multiply, to actually have kids. Like, how like you're in heat, like that's what it means to like be fruitful. True. So naturally, fish really wouldn't be able to reproduce.
Interesting.
So God had to kind of like circumvent or counteract that natural inability for them to have babies. And so he had to bless them. So what this really comes to show us is that in the end of the day, it's really up to God. And even if naturally it seems like none of the circumstances are working out for you, and you're a cold species, or your blood sugar is who knows what, or your temperature is not the right temperature, or your ovaries are not working properly, or you're this, that's all natural. Okay. But in the end of the day, it is possible for God to flip things around and miraculously allow those people who are not able to have, children naturally, or having fertility problems. He's able to change it. So that's what we should hope for. And that's basically my parting words.
I love it. Back to you, right? When we back to the part where we said, like, right, that Hashem wants people to daven to him. But what do you say when, like, it's someone who's religious and like they are davening to Hashem? Like, that's when it's really hard to understand. So I had to bring that back up, because I don't want anybody listening who's suffering from any fertility problems or anything to think like, oh, that means you're not davening hard enough. I mean,
Right.
that Hashem is in charge and we don't always understand why. So meaning sometimes for whatever reason, there could be a reason why, or it could be something else. And we don't always get what we want. That's the end of the day. Like, I just read 3 more Chayalim were killed, and like, we don't always get what we want. We can daven, we can whatever. And I truly understand the world, because we want it and just because we pray for it, it does not always mean we'll get it. So maybe I answered my own question, but I'll throw the floor back to you.
Yes, I think you did answer your own question. And of course, that is bottom line. Anything with regard to challenges that we're going through and suffering that people go through, we really, in the end of the day, don't understand. But at the same time, I think it's good for people to keep their hopes up,
For
and
sure.
to think that even after 20 years, like, I mean, look at Rivka. She was married for 20 years, and that's like normal. And you know what? We've heard of crazy stories in these days also. It wasn't so, I mean, I wouldn't say to wait till you're 90, but
Right.
I would, like Sarah, but I would say, you know what? 20 years is not impossible. And there's so many advances in technology these days, and like, even women in their 50s can change their, who knows what. And I think hope is a good thing. And especially if God is saying, this is what I want from you. I want you to daven. So, we can say, I'm davening. I'm asking you to just please, if it's meant to be, to please, help me work it out and give me the strength to handle whatever it is that you decide is the right thing for me. I mean, that's anytime we're suffering. I guess sometimes, it's just not meant to be, and we have to accept that, but better to hope, I think.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. I agree with you. Thank you so much. That was great.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Please seek guidance from a trusted healthcare professional. By listening to this podcast, you release Holy Health and any of our guests from all liability. I'd like to thank Joker Productions for editing this podcast.